Hi, good evening. Good evening. Welcome to the Beaches Watch monthly meeting. I'm Maria Mark. I'm the president of Beaches Watch, and I'm happy to welcome you here tonight. So we're in for an exciting presentation again on our update on our 2019 legislative session. We are lucky to have Representative Cord Byrd here, and we have Mayor Charlie Latham from Jacksonville Beach and Mayor Ellen Glasser from Atlantic Beach. So they will be giving you all the good, the bad, the ugly on what happened in this last legislative session, and particularly what has happened that could affect our quality of life here at the beach. So we're getting started a few minutes late, so I just want to make a few quick announcements here. Before we get started, we always like to, even before we recognize the elected officials, I wanted to give a big shout out tonight. Because as you tell when you came in, the library was not open. There were not people here like normally. So back in the spring, the Beaches board, they kind of redid the entire schedule for all of the libraries here in Duval County. And they were trying to find a way to extend hours in those libraries that really needed more time for the public, and yet also keep within their budget constraints and everything. So through this process, some of the libraries, such as Neptune Beach, we were going to be challenged with holding our monthly meetings here on Wednesday evening because they changed the operating hours. And so technically the beaches are closed, the library is closed tonight. But because we have such great community support, and I want to give a shout out to Chief Pike from Neptune Beach, stepped up and said he would lead, making sure we had a security officer here, which would be an off-duty police officer, which was required for us to continue to hold our meetings here on Wednesday nights, even though the library was closed. And so he graciously stepped up and said he would head up the scheduling, the police officers, off-duty police officers, to attend these meetings pro bono to ensure that we continue to offer this community service that Beaches Watch has done for the past 15 years. So thank you very much, Chief Pike. We really appreciate it. I also want to give a huge shout out to Teresa Rooney, who is the director for the library here. We also needed to have someone from their staff to be here as well for our meetings. And she graciously as well said she would volunteer to attend the meetings. So we have that covered so we can continue to have our meetings here, which is a service to us because it doesn't cost us to hold it as it would if we had to rent other facilities. So we're very fortunate that our community realizes the importance of these meetings to our community, and they've stepped up and volunteered their time. So thank you, Teresa. I think she's stepped out again, but give her a big hand. So going forward on our Wednesday night meetings, the main entrance is going to be locked, but you can still park in the parking lot out there. But the entrance is actually going to be back here. As you walk out, you'll see the double doors to your left. So it's just a short walk. There is some parking back here as well. So if you come here early enough, you can get the parking. But if not, you can park up front. But we ask that you now use the back entrance on our Wednesday night meetings. That will ensure the safety concerns to ensure that everyone here is just here for the meetings and not just to be in the library when it's not manned. So if you can do that, that would be great. We'll make sure we put that as a reminder on our newsletter and our announcements as well. Also, I want to make sure that you guys know about June 24th, we are holding in Adele Grange to honor Bill Gulliford, who has been a public servant for Atlantic Beach as well as Jacksonville, our Jacksonville Beaches here on the City of Jacksonville Council. We'll be holding a reception to recognize him for his lifetime of service to the community. It will be from 4 o'clock to 5:30 on Monday, June 24. If you're not familiar, Adele Grange is kind of in the heart of Atlantic Beach. Parking is very limited, so if you live in Atlantic Beach, we'd love it if you would bike your way there or walk there. But please, if you can come and join in the celebration and the recognition of Bill Gulliford, that would be great. There's no need to RSVP, it's just open to the public. Also, one other thing, when you sat down tonight, you saw a little slip of paper. That is our new survey. And we are looking to get input from our attendees just to make sure we're giving you the program and the information that you want, asking for any ways we can improve that. So before you leave, if you could just fill out the slip of paper. There's a box in the back that you can drop that into, or you can leave it on your chair so you can give it to one of our volunteers. That would be great. It's really short. Let's see. So, real quickly, we'd like to recognize our elected officials who are attending, and some of them are on our program tonight. So from Atlantic Beach, we obviously want to recognize Mayor Ellen Glasser, and we also have Commissioner Whitney Morris. And we have our City Manager, Joe Garrity. Anyone else from Atlantic Beach? Yeah. Okay. From Jacksonville Beach, we have Mayor Charlie Latham. We have Sandy Golding. And of course, we have the retired city manager, George Forbes. And we have Chris Hoffman.
And the new city manager,
And current city manager,
Mike Staphopoulos.
Mike S. Let's see, from Neptune Beach, I know we had our retired Dick Brown, who was on the council as well as on the city of Jacksonville. Do we have anyone else? Did I miss anyone? Okay, all right. And of course, we have Representative Ford Bird, who will be presenting in just a minute. Okay, as you know, our meetings are always videotaped, so for those who are at home, I'd like to just kind of go over some announcements real quickly. We are always looking to increase our membership, so it's $15 for individual, $20 for family, $5 for students. We're always accepting new members or renewing your membership. If you can see Eileen right there at the welcome table. Let's see, Seagate Avenue road closure at 5th Street until beginning June 3rd. The FDOT will be closing a portion of Seagate Avenue at 5th Street near Fletcher High School to replace the existing Seagate Avenue Bridge as part of the A1A Drainage Improvement Project. So just make sure you make time for that. Atlantic Boulevard at 3rd Street, we have an open house public hearing at the Beaches Branch Library. Drop by anytime between 4:30 and 6:30 to view displays and discuss proposed modifications with the FDOT staff and project consultants. A formal public comment period will begin at 6:30. For more information, contact Jeff Daugherty at 904-360-5575.
What's the
We
date?
also have
What's the date?
I'm sorry?
The date?
The date. June 18th. Sorry, Tuesday, June 18th from 4:30 to 6:30.
I think that's working.
Okay.
So I'm going to
Okay. Just make sure I'm not under it.
Yeah.
That's good.
I'm
Also on the back table, it's now announced our Beaches Sea Level Rise Forum. This is being hosted by the 3 beaches, Atlantic Beach, Jacks Beach, and Neptune Beach, and the Northeast Florida Regional Council. The date is Wednesday, June 19 at 6 p.m. It will be held at Fletcher High School Auditorium. This workshop, the Sea Level Rise Forum, is really about sea level rise and its impact on us here at the beaches. So it's, if you're available, it's extremely important. Each coastal area will determine the best course of action for their community and how the beaches will work together to mitigate the efforts of sea level rise and maximize our efforts. So pick up a flyer there at the back table. Let's see. There's going to be a dune revegetation planting scheduled South Jacks Beach, 16th Avenue to St. Johns County line from June 21 to 27. And then Neptune Jacks Beach from Lemon Street to 16th Avenue South will occur June 28 and 29 and July 8 through the 10th. Are we looking for volunteers for this? Or is that, no? Okay, that's just to let you know that they will be doing the dune restoration. And then our upcoming Beaches Watch meeting will be held, typically it's the first Wednesday, but because July 3rd is the first Wednesday, we know we have the 4th of July holiday, we're going to move it to the second Wednesday, which is July 10th, at the same time, 7 p.m. here at the library. We will have an update from our newest school board representative, Elizabeth Anderson, on Duval County Schools. So be sure to put that on your calendar and to attend that. Okay, so without further ado, we're going to go ahead and let Representative Floyd Bird go first. He has another engagement he's got to leave for at 7:30, so we'd like for him to come up and give us his recap on the legislative session.
Thank you, Maria. Good evening, welcome. It's good to be with everybody. It's good to be back home. We ended the legislative session on May 5th, and so after 60 days, it's nice to get back into the routine with the family dinner every evening. But before I begin, I do want to recognize my staff who's here. I have Christian Harvey in the back who's taking pictures. I have my legislative aide, Catherine Woodby, and the newest member of my team is probably someone that you know, Lisa White, who's a member of Beaches Watch, and she's my newest district secretary, so she will be manning the Jacksonville Beach office. So welcome. So this legislative session, we had over almost 3,500 total bills were filed between the House and Senate, and 197 have gone to the governor for his signatures. That's a little less than 10%. I always say, in any legislative process, it's not always what you pass, it's what bad things you stop from happening. So as you can see, we're very frugal in what ends up going to the governor. On tax relief, once again, we had significant tax relief for Floridians, including a 3-day back-to-school tax holiday, reduction in the business rent tax, a tax I've been paying since the Jacks Beach since 2012, so we're reducing that tax, and also the disaster preparedness tax holiday, which ends tomorrow. So if you haven't gotten your hurricane supplies, go ahead and get those tomorrow. And then, so we have a state budget of $91.1 billion. The governor is in the process now of reviewing the budget. I think it will come down below $91 billion when he's finished with vetoes. But most significantly, we put $3.4 billion in reserves. Florida has some of the highest reserves in the country. We have the most sound credit rating in the entire nation, and also the most sound pension system. So we're trying to be good fiscal stewards of your tax dollars. And speaking of that, I wanted to touch on some projects that Senator Bean and the other legislators were able to secure for Duval County, and specifically the beaches. And Senator Bean sends his regrets that he wasn't able to come tonight. But one of the things I worked on specifically with Mayor Curry and Chief of Police Williams is the Jacksonville Real-Time Crime Center expansion. So we secured $500,000 to update their real-time crime center so that they can more effectively combat crime around the city. Work with the Dolores R. Weaver Policy Center on the Girls Matter program. It's an effort to try to divert young women who are involved in the criminal justice system, try to keep them out of prison, out of our jails, out of the criminal justice system. Many of them end up being victims of abuse, so it's an effort to divert them out of the criminal justice system. That's $300,000. The 5-Star Veterans Center that is over in the Arlington area. This is to help homeless veterans that are dealing with PTSD and drug abuse, helping them get back on their feet. It's a wonderful program. You've probably seen the Farrah and Farrah commercials advocating for that. It's a project that an appropriations that I started a few years ago, and we secured $250,000 for the veterans. Rethreaded Inc., if you haven't been to their facility downtown, Rethreaded is a program that helps victims of human trafficking, once again, specifically young women, $250,000 for them to build a new building. For For Atlantic Beach specifically, Mayor and Joe, we secured $300,000 for the Aquatic Gardens Hopkins Creek Flood Mitigation Program. So last year we were able to secure money for Neptune Beach for flood mitigation. This year we got Jack's Beach and Mayor Latham. I think y'all are doing a real job, so we'll be ready next year. So thank you. Voices of Florida Open Doors Network outreach. This is another human trafficking effort. It's more statewide in its efforts, but obviously has a local impact. They're a wonderful organization. $750,000. Project Cold Case, working with State Attorney Melissa Nelson, $150,000, and then over almost $7 million for bridges along Heckscher Drive. So as you're going up, and once you take the ferry and you're going up Heckscher Drive, almost $7 million to revitalize the bridges at Myrtle Creek and Simpson Creek. Beaches Area Historical Society, $18,356. Beaches Fine Arts Series, $12,944, and almost $2 million for State Road A1A Timaquan Trail from Big Talbot to Little Talbot. So those are some of the specific appropriations that we're able to secure that impacts our area and our region. Big budget items. I know things that are important to Beaches Watch. We had over $4 billion in the budget for environmental programs. Governor DeSantis has been a real champion of stewardship and environmental programs. He ran on that, and he really advocated and pushed. The legislature stepped up, and we secured $686 million in investment in water quality and protection. That was actually, the legislature put $60 million more in than the governor actually requested in his budget. So we really stepped up this legislative session and said, Peninsula water is a priority as we continue to grow. We put more strain on our natural resources. We're doing everything we can to ensure that the water quality remains high. So $367 million Everglades restoration, $44 million to end Lake Okeechobee discharges. That's part of the red tide issues that we've seen in the news the last few years. And then $1.8 billion in Hurricane Michael recovery. If you've seen or been over to the Panhandle, Mexico Beach and those areas, they were just devastated. It was like a nuclear bomb went off. So we put almost $2 billion to try to help those people, our friends and neighbors over in the Panhandle, get back on their feet. Also very important, $783 million increase in K-12 education funding. So almost $800 million, I think it comes out to almost $140 per student in new education funding. Once again, record in the state of Florida funding for K-12 education. And then $285 million to recruit, retain, and recognize the state's best teachers. And I know last year we had a conversation, there were some teachers in the audience, and they were concerned about their SAT scores being used for the best and brightest and to secure the bonuses. We eliminated that. Many of us thought that was ridiculous. I was one of them. So we eliminated using your SAT score that you may have taken 20, 30 years ago as a basis for your bonus today. You should be measured by your success today, not something you may or may not have done many years ago. Some of the more policy-centered bills that we worked on, and I apologize for moving fast. I have a lot to go over in a short amount of time. Texting while driving. We all see this as a problem. Anyone who drives sees the issue. You look over, someone's been creeping over into your lane, and you're like, what the heck is this person doing? And you get up next to them, and you see them texting on their cell phone. So this will now make it a primary offense to text while driving. So prior to the bill's passage, it was a secondary offense in Florida. So if a police officer saw you texting, they couldn't pull you over unless you had a primary offense, a tag, expired tag, tail light out. They had to have some other reason to pull you over. Now it's a primary offense. So it's not hands-free. Georgia has hands-free. That was my preference because I think it would have been a cleaner law. I think it would have been more workable for our law enforcement officers to have a hands-free bill. But we didn't have the votes for that. But it is hands-free in a school zone or in a construction zone. So what I'm advising people to do is go ahead and try to figure out how you can be hands-free in your car. I mean, it really is the safest and most responsible way. If you do have your phone in your hand and you're using GPS or using it to talk, that is still legal. But if the police officer or law enforcement thinks you are texting, they can pull you over. And I think this is really important for our teenagers and those who are just starting to drive. And making sure that we, as parents and grandparents and mentors, let them know that we're not playing when it comes to texting and driving anymore. I mean, we've had, so I represent all of Nassau County as well, and up Lynn Turner. If you've been on Lynn Turner, it's a one lane each way. Just this year, 2 people were killed on the roads, and the sheriff's office suspects that it was because someone went over into the other lane because they were texting. The anti-Semitism bill, another one we were was proud to be a co-sponsor of. So it defines anti-Semitism for the first time in the state of Florida in the laws, and requires that educational institutions, K through 20 institutions, treat discrimination motivated by anti-Semitism in an identical manner to discrimination motivated by race. So however a school district or system treats racism, they have to treat anti-Semitism the same way. So they can't have different punishments for people motivated by anti-Semitism. Also on the topic of our law enforcement officers, I was the prime co-sponsor of a bill that increases, and Senator Bean was the prime sponsor of this bill. It is the police, fire, and search and rescue dog and police horses. I don't know how many of you saw the incident in the news with the police dog Fang, Canine Fang, who was killed last year. So we increased the penalties for someone who kills or injures a police dog or police horse, and working with law enforcement. That was one that was important to them, because when you see the working dogs, and many times those animals are putting their lives on the line to protect their human partner, and we wanted to make sure that we were recognizing their contribution. Also for our first responders, for firefighters specifically, there's a new cancer presumption in the law. So there are certain defined cancers. One of the things we've learned with our firefighters is that there's so many chemicals in the new building structures, and that when they go in, they're exposed to all of these dangerous, hazardous chemicals that are released when a fire occurs. And so many of our firefighters have developed these types of cancers. So now there's a presumption in the law. It's a rebuttable presumption, but the presumption is if a firefighter has certain types of cancer that is caused by their work, and they will be entitled to certain workers' compensation coverage. We had healthcare was our big reform in the legislature this year. So we did a lot of telehealth. It's amazing what's happening in the realm of telehealth, where you can have a doctor over the computer that can treat someone, especially in our rural areas. We have a deficit of licensed physicians, and people would have to drive many hours, many miles to go see a physician. Now they can get treatment, at least initially, through telehealth. Also for our children in school, they have these amazing devices where the school nurse can check ear, eyes, nose, and throat, and the doctor on the other end can be able to diagnose. And we did a live trial in committee, and it's amazing the clarity of what the physicians can see. On hospital licensure, we got rid of Certificate of Need, CON, which should bring more transparency and price controls. And when you look, we all know that healthcare prices are skyrocketing. We believe that by taking away the Certificate of Need and bringing more competition in the healthcare space, that will be a benefit to citizens. On medical marijuana, we authorized smokable medical marijuana and advances medical marijuana research. We eliminated the ban on whole flower marijuana to allow medical marijuana treatment centers to dispense marijuana in any form of smoking. So that was to try to comply with the constitutional amendment that was passed by the voters a couple of years ago. Let me see. On prescription drug importation, you may have seen this in the news. So there's a federal program that will allow prescription drugs to be purchased from Canada. So the state has gone ahead, the way the federal law works, the state had to implement the policy first, and now Governor DeSantis is working with the administration in D.C. to try to implement this to allow the drug importation from Canada, which once again we believe will drive down costs and give consumers more options. Let's see. For those of you who are familiar with the Gardner scholarships for children with certain disabilities, so there was a backlog and a waiting list. Governor DeSantis made it a priority that we eliminate the Gardner Scholar wait list. There's a school over here in Jacksonville. He's been a couple times, and it was vitally important. I mean, it's amazing what's happening, and when children are given the resources that they need. So we've now eliminated the Gardner Scholarship wait list. So every single child that needs the Gardner Scholarship, special needs child, will get it. Let's see. So sometimes it's really important, like as I mentioned, not what we pass, but what we don't pass. And I know Mayor Latham was over in Tallahassee several times on the issue of vacation rentals, something that's very important to coastal communities. And so there was a bill that had been filed that would have gotten rid of the grandfather clause such that Atlantic Beach has. And I was very concerned about that. I was watching the legislation. Like I said, Mayor Latham was there with some constituents several times during the session. And fortunately, we were able to, well, that bill didn't make it. It didn't pass. So we were able to stop it before, because we couldn't amend it to make it better. We'll come back next year and try to address it probably again. I don't think that the vacation rental proponents are going away. But the challenge for those of us in coastal communities, because we're the ones being impacted, is that for those inland where they don't have an issue with the vacation rentals, it's going to be increasingly difficult to muster the votes to get something good. So it's going to take your continued advocacy and letting your elected officials know, not only if I'm your representative, you know where I stand on that issue, but you need to let others around the area know that how this is impacting you. I mean, maybe Mayor Latham can address some of the challenges that are faced, and we met with constituents together talking about what's happening with the vacation rentals. But please stay engaged in that, because it is something that's impacting our communities. Oh, Mary, where are you? Mary Crozio. Hey, Mary wanted me to address House Bill 7103, which dealt with community development, and it has about 15 different components to that bill. So I'm going to touch on the ones that I think are most relevant. I keep my glasses small. Primarily, and Mary, I think you wanted me to address why I supported the bill. So a couple of things it did. On impact fees, it requires the impact fee to be paid when the impact occurs, not prior. So what we had in some municipalities were requiring impact fees to be paid before the local government had even approved the permitting. But specific to, say,
The prevailing party.
right, the prevailing party of fees, so correct. So many times litigation is used as a weapon to stall, delay. Both sides do it. They use litigation as a weapon. So part of the legislation streamlines the litigation. Why that was important to me is by streamlining the litigation process, it will save taxpayers money, because the municipalities won't have to spend less money fighting certain lawsuits. But it also has a prevailing party attorney fee. So in the case of Walmart, because Neptune Beach was right, under the new law, they would have actually been awarded their attorney's fees to be paid by Tribridge for losing the case.
You mean Kmart?
Kmart, I'm sorry, yes, the Kmart, yes. So so Kmart would have paid Neptune Beach's attorney's fees instead of the people of Neptune Beach paying their attorney's fees. So it's a prevailing party attorney fee now, which, once again, these laws, when we pass a law, it has to have statewide impact. And what we've seen are people using litigation deleteriously to slow down certain projects, even though they knew they were going to lose. But I mean, y'all were right on the law, and you won that case, and so the city would have recouped its fees.
Well, our concern is if we lost, if we
Right.
lost, then we have to pay their fees, and it seems to favor the big guy who's got the deep pockets to take the case.
I mean, listen, litigation is always tricky, and there, it's very. We try. I'm always looking to streamline it, to keep gamesmanship out of the litigation. But I think that it's sometimes on environment where there's an environmental impact on the project. Not that there aren't significant reasons sometimes to bring those types of lawsuits. But we've seen are lawsuits brought just merely to delay a project when there wasn't merit to it. So what we're trying to do is get both sides, to be honest, to really evaluate their case and decide whether or not it needs to go to litigation. The other aspect of that bill, and one of the reasons I voted for it, so there's a provision in the law that allows condominium associations to continue, the law will now allow them to continue to vote to waive fire sprinkler system retrofitting requirements and delays when a local authority may require a condominium association to retrofit fire sprinkler systems or engineered life safety systems before January 1, 2024. So some of our high-rises They were built before sprinkler fire suppression systems went into place. Many of these, so I have several of them in my district, Nassau County, Duval, or the beaches. And so I was contacted prior to session. They were very, very concerned because many of these are people who are on fixed incomes. They're retired individuals. And to retrofit a building for fire suppression can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. And we saw that as a potential a tax. So now the condo association, the people who buy in, you're a property owner in a condominium association. You have contractual rights, you have voting rights. We wanted to continue to allow those people. So that was one of the other reasons why, when we're weighing and balancing why you vote for something or vote against something, that I didn't want to put another tax or burden on those condominium owners. Did you have any other questions on that one, Mary?
Thank you.
Can I take a few questions? I know, are you not willing to do that? I mean, I probably got 5 minutes or so.
It's up to you, because I know you're under time constraints. We do want to make sure we have enough time for the
Yes.
mayors to
Yes.
give them questions as well as Q&A, so maybe 2 questions.
Sure. Well, let me touch on one other item that I think is important that didn't pass. So we were working very hard on, anybody familiar with biosolids? Think of your poop emoji on your phone. So what happens is in South Park, below the head of the St. Johns River, the river flows from south to north. There are waste haulers who take waste biosolids and dump them close to the river. That waste ends up making its way all the way up to St. John's to our lovely community. So we were trying to prohibit them or put limitations on their ability to dump near waterways. They're a powerful lobby, more powerful than I thought they would be. And so while that wasn't my bill, I was working with the sponsor, and we were going to come back next year to try to limit their ability, because it goes to the quality of the water in the St. Johns River, and we can find I think a better way than just dumping the solids on our land, or if we have to do that, at least not near the water. So with that, I'll open it up for a couple of questions. Yes, sir.
Yeah, you said that the schools got basically 140, I saw it in the Times Union too, $142 per student increase. Florida still ranks right at the bottom of the barrel as far as education. And have we even reached 2007 levels yet? As far as funding?
So for total dollars, it's record funding. I'd have to go back and see what it is per pupil. It was significantly more. I mean, I think last year under Governor Scott's last budget, it was about 40 cents per student increase. This is over $140. It's $800 million more. And I think you will continue to see that number rise as we try to improve the quality of our public education. Yes, ma'am.
Did that legislation affect charter schools as well?
So there was some charter school legislation as well. I mean, we do believe, and I've been a proponent all along, I've said this every time I've met with y'all, that I am a proponent of school choice, whether that's homeschool, charter school, private school, public school, whatever's best. I mean, we really, really believe that competition is best, and also doing what's best for the parent and the child. I mean, so I'm chair of the Higher Education and Career Readiness Committee, but I also sit on the Full Education Committee, and we heard testimony from parent after parent after parent whose child had the ability to go to a charter school or private school with some of the scholarships that we've made available, and talked about the transformation that it's made in their children's lives, whether that child was being bullied and needed to get away from a dangerous environment, or just needed a learning environment where there was more discipline. And so it's very important to me, and I'm very proud of the work that we have done to give parents the ability to meet the needs of their child. Yes, sir.
You said we need more advocates to fight education violations.
Right.
What specifically can we do to advocate?
So once a bill is filed, I mean, if there's legislation filed next year, and you'll know immediately. I mean, we'll know, because we'll be back in committee weeks in the fall, in September. We'll be back over in Tallahassee for committee weeks. And next year, because it's an election year, we'll be in early session, so it'll be around January. But what I'm trying to do is find the balance. I mean, there is a property rights component. It's a constitutional right. You buy a piece of property, you want to do something, you should have the right to do certain things with it. But what we see is a single-family home in a single-family community where they're advertising it as it's a 3-2 home, and it's sleeps 20. And we've seen this over and over and over again, and the impact that causes. And by the time somebody rolls in Friday night and the police are called 2 or 3 times, they're gone Sunday morning or Sunday afternoon, and then there's no, so I think we need an enforcement or punishment mechanism, perhaps something where if somebody had, 3, 4, 5 code violations in a certain given period of time, that they would lose their right to use their property as a vacation rental. So I think there is a balance to be had. It's just bringing both sides to the table and to try to negotiate, and that's where the talks have broken down thus far, is that each side wants their way. But I do believe that where there are, when the legislature gives municipalities grandfather clauses, so to speak, and Atlantic Beach availed themselves of that we shouldn't now take it away when they've done what we said they were required to do. But we'll let you know and keep you posted, and I'm sure that the mayors will as well when and if legislation is filed next session. All right. Oh, can we take one more?
Just one more.
Yes, sir.
I may be ignorant of the law, but doesn't the idea of a commercial enterprise taking place in a residentially owned area come into play here?
Well, you're absolutely right. But people, you are allowed to rent your, a room out. We hear stories of, a widow who needs to rent a room out in her home to be able to continue to pay the mortgage. And so people now can engage in limited or some types of commercial activity. But really, when we talk about the vacation rentals, we haven't. I think it's more in the nature of a license than it is a lessor-lessee agreement. I'm going to get. I don't want to avoid getting too technical. And be more than happy if you really want to come and talk to me about it. We can get somewhat into the weeds on the legalities because it's pretty detailed. But those are some of the considerations. Are these mini hotels that are in residential neighborhoods, or is this a commercial activity which we can, which the cities can deal with their limited resources as well. So once again, it's finding that balance. That you make a valid point, and that is one of the areas that we need to try to find some compromise. All right. So thank you. I have my office in Jacks Beach. If any of you want to follow up and ask me any questions, please contact my staff, email me, call me. I'm always available. I'm more than happy to meet with constituents. As always, it's an honor and privilege to serve you in Tallahassee. Thank you. Thank you.
And we'll have Mayor Charlie Leahy. Jacks Beach. Can I see you?
Hello. Hey, all right. Hey, everybody. Nobody needs to see my face. Thanks to Court Bird. A lot of the stuff obviously that I intend to cover, probably Mayor Glasser intended to cover, has already been covered now. So we're going to step back and focus on a couple of things and maybe extrapolate a little bit on some of the things that are more important to us. I want to take a minute first just to talk a little bit about the mechanics of Tallahassee too, because sometimes we take that for granted. You all know probably there's 40 senators. Our senator is Aaron Meany. Those senators have unlimited ability to file bills in each session. Court Bird, our representative on the House side, is only allowed to file 6. So they have to walk a fine line and make things challenging when they're trying to benefit their citizens, and at the same time their leadership's telling them that they've got to reserve 2 bills for leadership or whatever the case may be. So it's been a real big fight, I think, to get some progress made, but both Representative Bird and Senator Bean have done some great things for us in the last couple of sessions. As you all know, there's 120 representatives and 40 senators. There's 160 legislators throughout the state of Florida. A lot of the legislation that we see passed has to do with South Florida, not us. And so that's a lot of times we all shake our heads and say, why in the world is this even on our affecting us here in Jacksonville Beach or the beaches? And it's because there's an issue in South Florida, and that's how the legislature tends to deal with it, is let's pass a law. A perfect example is the CRAs, Community Redevelopment Agency. Everybody knows that there are 2 CRAs in Jacksonville Beach, one on the south end and one in the downtown area. And we basically rebuilt Jacksonville Beach from those two SRAs for the last 20, 25 years. About 2 or 3 years ago, I can't honestly remember where it was down there in Dade County, but one of the cities down there misused their CRA funds and hired a rapper to come to a party that they were throwing for Bulldog or Pitbull or something. But Ellen was there as well. Yeah. But, you know, they all of a sudden, the legislature stepped back and said, we've got people that are grossly mismanaging these things and we need to get them under control. And so we're going to go ahead and pass these laws, either take away the municipality's ability or severely limit the possibility of their capabilities. So for the last 2-3 years, we've been working really hard to try to block that. Well, this year, they actually did pass a bill, House Bill 9, and it was by Representative Lamarco. And it kind of disguises the real intent of the bill. The bill basically says it requires all CRA members to go through ethics training. And oh, by the way, we're going to be phasing that CRA on September 31st, 2039. So they've been able to get in there and impact all of us. And for those who are just, I know, Mayor Glasser's looking at a CRA, I think up in the Newport area, no? Not right now, well, not anymore. That ability's gone away. So, you know, that's unfortunate. Representative Byrd already said about 1 in 17 bills passed this year, of the almost 3,400 that were filed. A couple of, you know, home rule. Anytime a bill starts with prohibiting local governments from, that's where we all need to stand up and let the Herring Vacuum stand up and say, what in the world are these guys doing? Well, here's one of them that passed this time that Court didn't mention, and that's Senate Bill 82 by Senator Bradley, and that's gardens, vegetable gardens. Now we can't prohibit anybody from putting a vegetable garden all the way up to the street if that was in the front yard. And why in the world that's important to our legislators, I can't figure it out. We had a couple of environmental impact bills that didn't pass, and it's worth talking about them as well. One of them is Senate Bill 88, which was the preemption of recyclable and polystyrene materials, so plastic bags and styrofoam cups. This is basically took away or would take away the municipality's ability to ban the product. Well, that failed, thankfully, so we still have that in our control for right now. Now, Orlando immediately passed a ban on plastic bags on city property. So we're all watching to see how that works, because you can imagine, I'm sure you're coming from Oshkosh, Wisconsin, to come down to Orlando, take your family to Disney World, you get out of it, you've got plastic bags, you're sitting down having a picnic or whatever the case may be. It's going to be interesting to see how they enforce the use of those bags. Some of these Mr. Cord has already talked about. Texting while driving, I think it's really important. We're the 44th state to pass that law. And, you know, you think about all the people from Public Works, the electric utilities, the garbage collection guys, the mail people. There are literally hundreds of people. Just in the solid waste industry this year, over 100 people were being killed on the side of the road by people that were texting while they were driving. And it's funny, you sit there and you think about millennials and young kids and, you know, the whole 9 yards. Well, part of the bill process, when you go through and get a bill passed into law, it goes through committees. And you know, basically file a draft and it goes through the different committees. And each committee chair cannot hear the bill if they don't want to. So each committee chairman has the ability to kill the bill. And this happened the first year that texting while driving came out. I won't mention the senator's name, but it said, I believe it's a personal freedom, and that everybody should be able to do that. And it's funny because I noticed from that point on, I was paying attention to people in the cars when I was driving back and forth on I-10, and it was all these old legislators. So, you know, finally I think the senator in question, who is not from around here, I'll tell you that, eventually said, yeah, I've come to realize that this is not safe. So we actually got it through the pipeline, and as Representative Byrd said, you can't even have really a phone in the main of school zones, which is great, because that's where the biggest potential for tragedy exists. I'm going to go fast too, so Ms. Mary Glasser has a couple of minutes. This one's fun. There was a law passed, it's House Bill 453. It's like an Uber bill for scooters. And it allows these scooter companies to let people come in and just, you rent the scooter and you take it wherever you want, and drop it off when you're done and using the app to tell them where you left it and the whole nine yards. Well, it became a real problem in Tampa, because in Tampa these things were rolling up all over the place and people weren't coming to collect them, so they had just scooters like everywhere. So they filed a ban on the scooter businesses, and of course their lobbies came up, went back to Tallahassee, filed a bill that passed, and now municipalities can't control scooters. So if you see that starting to bloom in Jacksonville Beach or Neptune Beach or Atlantic Beach, I'll know why. House Bill 771, Senate Bill 816. This was an environmental bill that was passed. This is a good bill and a bad bill at the same time. One side goes yay, the other side goes, what the heck? But it was a bill that was passed. We have a real problem in our country. If you haven't been to one of the lectures from Go Beaches, Go Green, or the Green Chamber of Commerce, we got a real problem with recycling right now. And the price to recycle has gone up to, in most areas, including ours, $98 a ton. It used to be when recycling came out, we had 2 tins and we'd set it out into a dual source separated mode. There was contamination of less than 4% statewide. And so we had good material, people were willing to buy it. We found markets all over the United States and overseas that would take them. Well, what's happened is in most cases we've done this what's called single source recycling. I think all of us have it here, which is the big 95-gallon can with a different colored lid on it. And you do what a lot of people call wish recycling. You throw it in there and you wish it be recycled. What it does is it takes the contamination up really high. So right now the contamination rate in Florida is somewhere between 32 and 40%. So, I mean, that makes it almost unbearable for waste companies and recycling companies to pull that material out and make a useful product of it. So what the environmental community did was they set up a bill for the second year in a row that basically says all they want is for municipalities and waste and recycling companies to address contamination in their agreement. And it passed last year, House and Senate, the governor vetoed it because it became part of an environmental bill and they began fracking or something. And so that bill was lost. Well, it happened again this year where it passed the House and the Senate. This time, it was actually Representative Berg's roommate. I think it was one that came down with legislation that said at the very last minute, we want to ban straws. Or we want to stop the municipalities' abilities to ban straws for 5 years while we conduct research. And it passed on partisan lines through the House and the Senate, but the governor vetoed it because of the straws. So we're going back to square one again. We're still having a problem with recycling. We can't get the legislature behind us, so we're going to continue to work on that. Vacation rentals. This is going to be pretty much the biggest one I talk about. And I think everybody, one way or another, is impacted by this either because you're a property owner or you rent periodically your house out or you're people who do. You know, I live on the east side of 3rd Street, and directly across the street from me is 4 duplexes. 2 of the 4 duplexes are short-term rentals. Never had a problem. Never once had a problem. We've had short-term rentals in Jacksonville Beach for as long as I can remember. And, you know, George will tell you back there, we never really thought about any ordinances because we quite frankly didn't need them. Everybody seemed to pretty much, you know, work with respect with the owners and the neighbors and stuff, property issues really weren't that big a deal. Well, where we are now is you take a house in a single-family neighborhood, and I think it was you, sir, that brought up the zoning. I think the zoning is very broken, and it should be addressed, and it's one of the things that we're talking about with the legislature. But you're taking a single-family home in a single-family neighborhood, and then you're turning around and you let the corporation buy one next to it. And it should be zoned commercial because there are commercial considerations, bed tax considerations, parking considerations that might come into play, maximum capacity of people. So this all started actually with a circumstance exactly like that in Jacksonville Beach. And Corbett was kind enough with Aaron and me both to hold joint city hall or town hall with me and about a dozen of the constituents in that neighborhood so that I wanted them to hear for themselves what kind of problems we're dealing with. I'm all for property rights. I'm a property owner. It's the biggest investment I've got. But I also think my neighbors have the same property rights. And that's where we have to find the balance. But we've worked really hard in Jacksonville Beach to support some compromise. Representative Bird's roommate in Tallahassee, Representative Grant, was actually the sponsor of one of the bills that would put some controls in the legislation to give people, give municipalities the ability to kind of regulate a little bit the bad actors. So Jacksonville Beach was actually the only city in the state of Florida that gave them some language, modified language to use to get the bill to the next stage, to the next committee. And of course, the bill was TP, which means temporarily postponed, and then the committee's closed, so the bill died. The bill's coming back, there's no question. So in Jacksonville Beach, we're working, our team, our council was working very hard to put together some new language, and we're getting an outflow of people that are coming in and saying, hey, I'm a realtor, I've got so many units, and this is going to kill me, and we're not after those customers. We're not after your customers. We've never had problems with those customers. We're talking about the people that come in under corporations, buy houses, turn them into hotels and neighborhoods, and destroy the ability to raise your family in a happy environment because they're running a big business there. So we're going to continue to work the language. I think the city manager is working on a date for our next workshop. I think 27th, that might be. But we're going to offer time for the public to come in and comment. So watch the paper. The Beaches Leader will probably post it. I'm sure Beaches Watch may post it if we have enough time. But come out and tell us what's on your mind, because it's important for us to draft the legislation that's going to work for our community. Because 85% of these units are in 11 counties in the state of Florida. And like Representative Bird said, they don't care over in Putnam County because they don't have short-term rental in Putnam County. So the lobby for the Airbnbs, they're putting all their effort in these outside counties that don't have any interest. They don't care. They're just taking time to educate them to why they should block them. And I had a few more things to go over, but I don't want to leave Mayor Glass for at least a few minutes. So thanks very much for being here tonight. We appreciate it.
All right, Ellen, you've got 2 minutes.
Well, turnabout is fair play. He usually goes last, and we usually take all of his time. So I am not Teresa Green. But I said, I am the mother of Daisy Glasser. Anybody read the paper today? She might be the most prolific pedestrian in the county. So she's more famous than I am. So check out the Tom James today. All right. So if anybody's got to leave, I totally understand. I really was going to use our time to talk really about home rule. We throw that term around a lot, but by and large, by and large, people don't really get a great understanding of how that works in Tallahassee. I just sort of equate, and I have tremendous respect for our legislators in Tallahassee because this is my first year spending time there. And it's like a sausage factory. I mean, it's just so chaotic. And so, as I frame my comments about home rule, I want to say what's great about local government is that this is where people can tell you what they think about things and where there's actually a conversation. So when Mayor Latham talks about, give us some input on short-term rentals, we can actually work with the state legislators to craft legislation that's going to work better. It may not be what we really want, but it works better. And so, as sort of words to live by Abraham Lincoln, public sentiment is everything. Without public sentiment, nothing can fail. Without it, nothing can succeed. That doesn't mean we're all going to agree, but at least people have an opportunity to have their voice be heard. So what is home rule? It's the flexibility to address unique local needs with local solutions. What's been happening in Tallahassee, about 200 of the bills that were introduced this year had to do with preemption of local authority or unfunded mandates to local governments. And so, lobbyist is not a bad word, but we have the Florida League of Cities. They represent cities like us, small towns, medium-sized towns, big cities, and they work on our behalf. And we're fairly united in terms of, what the work is that they do for us. So home rule is embedded both in legislation with the Municipal Home Rule Powers Act, and it's in the Florida Constitution. And basically what it says is that local decision-making or decision-making in legislation should really tilt in favor of local governments. unless there's a prevailing state interest. And so again, we may not disagree on what constitutes a prevailing state interest, but when Governor DeSantis vetoed the moratorium on plastic straws, that's the language that he used in his response, is that he could not figure out how banning cities from prohibiting the use of plastic straws, single-use plastic. He could not articulate how that had a prevailing state interest, if you know what I mean. So I'll just give you an example of what might be a prevailing state interest. Texting while driving. That could be a prevailing state interest, and the League of Cities was neutral on that. One that might not be a prevailing state interest is the regulation against municipalities from regulating tobacco products. I mean, early on in the session, a bill was presented to allow municipalities to ban smoking on the beach. Well, that didn't go anywhere, because there's some big lobbies that are going to be behind that. Atlantic Beach, I want to ban smoking in parks, where the playgrounds are, but I can't do that because the state tells me I can't. So is that a prevailing state interest? That's sort of the test that I use when I look at some of the legislation that is introduced. So what is a prevailing state interest? That's something you might want to think about. So the League of Cities is our lobbying organization. We have 412 cities. They are our voice, so we speak with one voice. But there are a lot of ways that we get involved. I know Mayor Brown and I have been on legislative action committees. We had a press conference on home rule in the Capitol this year. We do service projects. Mayor Latham and I did one at a mental health facility in Tallahassee. Got some great ideas there. We brought back here things that might help with the opioid crisis. And in fact, we've been talking about doing a combined beaches forum on suicide in the fall, because it is a huge problem that people don't really talk about very much. We're doing the sea level rise forum together. These are things that we work together on, and that's part of what we do with the League of Cities. Communication is key. So we all communicate a lot with Representative Byrd and Senator Meany. We don't always agree, but there's a great line of communication. I think one of the reasons that I sort of hit the radar this year, for some reason I'm a home rule hero this year, is because I sent about a gazillion emails. And you know what's interesting about that? I didn't get one reply of substance to any of the emails that I sent to any of the state legislators. So if that tells you a little bit about, how, your voice at the local level matters. I don't know what else does. I personally respond to every substantive email that I get, but I have no expectation that my state legislators are. So keep doing it, guys, but that's just sort of the way of the world. Oh, and the experience in Tallahassee. Oh my gosh, I was there 3 or 4 times, and I was so confused. It's worth going. It's like going to a reunion. You walk down the street and you see somebody you know from this or somebody you know from that. Everybody ends up there, and sort of the baggage that goes with that is that this is why a lot of bills are presented to the state rather than local governments, because it's a lot easier for lobbyists to take their case to Tallahassee than to take it to cities. And so, again, lobbyist is not a bad word, because the League of Cities is ours. Our city of Atlantic Beach has one, but it's just the way the game is played in Tallahassee. It's very hard to keep up. Okay, I'm going to go through some of this. Because of the trip to Israel, there was an extension on passing some of the legislation. Where are we on that? Charlie, do you know? Yeah, we're still waiting on feedback on a number of the bills that were presented and the budget. Do you know, Christian? The budget hasn't been approved.
Not yet.
Okay. So in the headlines, what did we see? We saw smokable medical marijuana. We saw expanded school choice. We saw money for charter schools, which is interesting because the state's going to give money to charter schools when the school districts are going to be left holding the bag for public schools. So that's an interesting one. Texting while driving, again, the League of Cities was neutral on that. Banning the creation of sanctuary cities. So that was a big one in the news. And basically it requires cities to uphold the federal immigration laws. So local authorities are going to be expected to fulfill the legal obligation under federal law against immigration. But it's controversial. Boosting laws to arm teachers. You probably read about that one. Just to sort of, if I have time to share a story, one of the days that I went, we did a mood session with Senator Bean. Anybody that's been around Senator Bean knows he is a character. I mean, like a professional auctioneer. I mean, he really is masterful with his words. So he picked me to argue against arming teachers, and it did not go over very well, let's just say that. But it's not going to be every teacher. It's going to be those teachers that want to participate. So it's not a mandatory program. I will say another daughter is a third grade teacher, and I'm not too keen about her carrying her classroom, but we'll see how that works out. It does give school districts more control over how they implement those guardian programs. Okay, what else was in the news? We passed the allowing felons to vote, convicted felons to vote, and not for all convicted felons, but for nonviolent ones. So this was in the news that we're going to require those felons to pay court fees before they can register to vote. Sometimes that's a lot of money. And then lastly, the plastic straw moratorium. I think that Governor DeSantis' veto of that bill was pretty unique. And Charlie's bit with the requirements to disclose levels of contamination in recycling, unfortunately went down in flames with that. I don't think anybody expected that. That would come back. But it was real interesting on the plastic straws. So, and again, it goes back to whether banning the straws has a prevailing state interest. Okay, so Representative Byrd talked about some of the major highlights. I can come back to that if necessary, but I don't think so. So going back to home rule, I want to tell you about what the position was of the League of Cities and then what happened. It's kind of an uphill battle with the League of Cities because even though they fight and oppose some of the legislation as preemptive or as unfunded mandates, most of them passed anyway. So we just do the best we can. So this is communication services. You may remember, like in the past couple of years, there was legislation passed for 5G, which allowed placement of these communication services in right-of-ways. Well, this is going to walk that back a little bit, so we have less control over where that stuff goes. The League of Cities opposed it as preemption. It passed. The federal immigration and sanctuary policies, that's the bill that would ban sanctuary cities. It's called the Rule of Law Adherence Act. The League of Cities was neutral on that. It passed. Redevelopment agencies. Mayor Lincoln talked about that. We don't have one in Atlantic Beach. The League of Cities was opposed to the initial version. Through the sausage-making process, amendments were offered. It became less onerous at the end. Am I right on that?
Well, it's still, sunsets.
Yeah, so, well, the League was neutral on that. That passed. Micro-mobility devices, those are the e-scooters. Also, Mayor Lincoln spoke about that. It basically would mandate cities to regulate these scooters the same way they do as bicycles. Where that came from, I'm not entirely sure. The League was opposed to it. It passed. Mandated benefits for firefighters with cancer. Representative Byrd mentioned this a little bit. You might think, oh, this is a feel-good thing. You've got firefighters with cancer. We should take care of them. But he talked about the different types of cancer and whether that was going to be the right solution. The League of Cities was opposed to that as a mandate. We don't have a fire department in Atlantic Beach, so it doesn't affect us. For cities that do have fire departments, it could be a very expensive mandate. The League of Cities passed that. Attorney's fees and costs. This is another mandate that was opposed by the League of Cities. It allows the award of attorney's fees to the prevailing party if a local ordinance is preempted by the state. This is not the Kmart example. This is Coral Springs, passes an ordinance of prohibiting plastic bags. That is preempted by the state, so then there's a lawsuit. So that is a matter where if Coral Springs loses that, then they will have to pay the other party's attorney's fees, or vice versa. So that sort of sets up, for, one party is not as well equipped to pay those attorney's fees as others are. So let me go to the next one, which is property development. This is the one that would apply to Kmart. This one really is outside of the city domain. I tried to find out what the position was of the League of Cities on this, and I was not able to determine that, which is why it says unknown. It did pass. In addition to changes with the growth management law and other things, what it will require is we're entitled, a prevailing party in a lawsuit, to have their legal fees reimbursed by the opposing side. So let's just say a watchdog group files a suit against the developer and loses. They will be entitled, the prevailing party or the developer will be entitled to get attorney's fees paid by the watchdog group. It doesn't have the resources or the money. I'm not taking a position either way, but this one is sort of in that private sector, unlike the other one that I talked about, where the city's doing something that is preempted and they have their own ordinance. Do you follow? All right. Okay, affordable housing. This was in the news a little bit, where it removed the abilities of cities to mandate a given amount of affordable housing in new developments and to cap prices. It makes it voluntary now. Then you also have to provide incentives to the developer to do that. This was opposed by the League of Cities as a mandate, and it passed. So just think to yourself, is there a prevailing state interest, and who benefits from that and who does not benefit? Make up your own mind. Impact fees, I think, did you talk about this, Mayor Lincoln, or did Representative? Yeah, this was restricting cities from imposing impact fees before you've gotten a permit or before you have a good idea exactly what the amounts are going to be. Cities rely on these fees, right? This is for police services, infrastructure, other things like that. And so the League of Cities was opposed to that as preemption, and it passed. Are we seeing a trend here? Tree trimming ordinance. This is one that says cities may not enforce requirements against residential property owners to trim or remove a tree that they have a certification from an arborist that the tree is dangerous. So whatever your permitting requirement is in your city, this is going to trump that. So we're in the process of looking at what ours is now to see how it affects us, because we love our trees in Atlantic Beach. And it also prohibits the city from requiring that property owner to replace the tree that's been removed, that's damaged. The League of Cities, I didn't put that on here, was opposed to that, and it passed. Is there a prevailing state interest in this? I don't see one. This is a big one for Atlantic Beach. Okay, so I have a couple that passed, no, not there yet. Sorry, vegetable gardens. The League opposed it, it passed. Local options surtax, that requires that referenda for surtaxes be scheduled at the time of a general election rather than a special election or an election where there's going to be a lower turnout. League was neutral on that, it passed. It's particularly relevant to us in Duval County as we talk about a vote on a surtax for our capital improvements to the Duval County schools. Okay, and these are the ones that failed. Private property rights. I don't want to get into the weeds on this because I'm over on my time, but it basically says that if you get a variance for something in your city, that variance cannot be used to say, well, everybody that's in that same situation gets the same variance. That removes control from the cities. So that bill failed. Short-term rentals failed. Really didn't get a vote. I remember I was talking to Mayor Latham about that, and he says, it was TP. I'm like, toilet paper. So I had to get familiar with the lingo. And then lastly is the one that I mentioned, or that we've all mentioned, banning of plastic straws that also address contamination in residential recycling. It passed, it was vetoed by Governor DeSantis. He's not having a prevailing state interest, so it failed. So we'll see what happens in the next session on that. Okay, local funding, Representative Byrd mentioned the wins for Jacksonville. I think it's $11 or $14 million in projects for Jacksonville, and wins for the beach. And my city manager tells me I can't talk about what we hope we're going to get in the budget for aquatic gardens, but Representative Byrd already did. So we have a lobbyist, and that lobbyist, has given us a return on our investment that is very, very favorable to us. And so we're very grateful. So it is an honor to serve. I thank our legislators in Tallahassee for the very difficult job that they do. They do a great job, and appreciate your time. I'm not taking questions. George Forbes can answer any questions that you have.
Sorry, but you're not presenting that. Okay, so it's 8:15. Normally, we would have been out of here by this meeting by now, but it did take a little longer. We do want to give you some time, though, to ask questions from Mayor Latham and Mayor Glasser. So we'll take maybe 5 burning questions, maybe 5 questions, so we can get out of here in a reasonable time. So if you guys want to step up and I'll give you the microphone. And please make your questions brief. Don't give us like a dissertation before you ask the question. Okay? Do you have any questions?
Everybody wants to go home.
George, yes.
Mr. Latham, Mayor Latham, I have one question. I would like to know what the definition of driving is in the law regarding texting. Like if I'm stopped at the traffic signal at Pembina Beach, which runs for 30 minutes anyway, the red light, can I get my phone out and text? Because if my car is stopped, is that considered
Even
driving?
if you're a stoplight, you can text.
You know how to text.
But you're going to get honked at when you sit there reading.
He doesn't know how to text. Trick question, trick question.
Can't type fast enough.
Anybody else? You guys can go home. Mr. Buck, Honorable Mr.
I
Buck.
think everybody's probably tired.
Oh my God.
It is hot.
On yesterday's financial news, on vacation rentals, there was a man that they're already big in it, and they'll have 2,100 more units by the end of the year. And the person doing the interview said, are you a public or a private company? And he said, right now we're private. And he laughed, but he indicated that wouldn't be for much longer. I predict this is going to be the next Uber, Lyft in the country. This man had huge projects online.
We got a fight on our hands, there's no question.
It's going to be bad.
Short-term rental.
Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
Mayor, last year, the same kind of thing, you said something about guns, and there was a problem because the state wasn't letting us do
Same
something.
year, 2011, the state preempted our ability to regulate guns, to the point that if we see somebody with a gun and walk up and talk to them, we violated the law, we can be fined $5,000 as individuals and not use our city attorney to protect us.
And are there other things like that that they're...
Well, short-term rentals is another, perfect example.
It's working, other things are working toward that direction for fines against cities taking action.
And Mayor Glasser did a great job of summarizing the last few slides to show you that this is just happening over and over and over and over again. And I mean, I'm very active in the League of Cities as well, and we all put our arms together and try and get in front of as many people as we can. But the real conundrum is, for like Representative Byrd, like I said, they're serving 2 masters. I'd like to think that you say, my constituents are number 1, and that's all I'm going to go and fight for my constituents. If you do that, you can fail very quickly in Tallahassee. You've got to be receptive to leadership. You've got to you've got to be able to negotiate with the Speaker of the House what bills really are important to you and which ones they're willing to let go. I mean, it's really, really challenging to do what they do.
You got a great person in terms of his legislative skills. I mean, I call him all the time to ask for advice on that. And he's certainly a free agent.
A little bit.
Yeah.
I get to wear 2 hats. So thankfully I get to spend a lot of time in Tallahassee for my company, but that gives me the opportunity just spent a lot of time there for the city as well. And Ellen was designated, she's new as the mayor, and she was designated home rule hero, which is a big deal. And I just got my 5th consecutive home rule hero, so I've been very engaged with them in Tallahassee as well.
Okay, so if there are no more questions, if we could have another round of applause for our